So, for our first book, we're going to be reading The Ancient Secret of the Flower of Life by Drunvalo Melchizedek. I'm really excited to share this one with you. It's crazy. It goes all over the place. If you have an open mind like I do, you're going to really enjoy this ride. I'll read the back just to get us warmed up. Once, all life in the universe knew the flower of life as the creation pattern, the geometrical design leading us into and out of physical existence. Then, from a very high state of consciousness, we fell into darkness and forgot who we were. For thousands of years, the secret was held in ancient artifacts and carvings around the world and encoded in the cells of all life. Now we are rising up from that sleep, shaking old stale beliefs from our minds and glimpsing the golden light of this new dawn streaming through the windows of perception. This book is one of those windows. Here, Drunvalo Melchizedek presents in text and graphics the first half of his Flower of Life workshop, illuminating the mysteries of how we came to be, why the world is the way it is, and the subtle energies that allow our awareness to blossom in its true beauty. Sacred geometry is the form beneath our being and points to a divine order in our reality. We can follow that order from the invisible atom to the infinite stars, finding ourselves at each step. The information here is one path, but between the lines and drawings lie the preface. Only one spirit. Long before Sumeria existed, before Egypt had built Saqqara, before the Indus Valley flourished, spirit lived in human bodies, dancing in high culture. The Sphinx knows the truth. We are much more than we know. We have forgotten. The flower of life was and is known by all life. All life, not only here but everywhere, knew it was the creation pattern, the way in, the way out. Spirit created us in this image. You know this is true. It is written in your body, in all of our bodies. Long ago, we fell from a very high state of consciousness, and the memories are just now beginning to emerge. The birth of our new, old consciousness here on earth will change us forever and return us to the awareness that there is truly only one spirit. What you're about to read is a journey through my life, through this reality, how I learned about the Great Spirit and about the relationships that each of us have with all life everywhere. I see Great Spirit in the eyes of everyone, and I know that he or she is within you. You already hold within your deepest being all the information I will be sharing with you. When you first read it, it may seem like something you've never heard before, but it isn't. This is ancient information. You can remember things that are deep inside you, and it's my hope that this book will trigger these things so you can remember who you are, why you came here, and what your purpose is for being here on Earth. A quick note to the reader. The Flower of Life workshop was presented internationally by Drunvalo from 1985 until 1994. This book is based on a transcript of the third official videotape version of the Flower of Life workshop, which was presented in Iowa in 1993, yada, yada, yada. Basically, the most important thing about this note to reader that you should know is that this book is a transcription, so that's why sometimes it's a little choppy. It jumps around a little bit, and just know that it's because it actually wasn't like written to be a book initially. Introduction. Part of my purpose in presenting this work is to assist people to be aware of certain events that have happened on the planet, or are presently happening, or are about to happen. Events that are radically affecting our consciousness and the way we're living today. By understanding our present situation, we can open to the possibility of a new consciousness, a new humanity emerging on Earth. In addition, perhaps, my dearest purpose is to inspire you to remember who you really are and to give you the courage to bring your gift to this world. For God has given each one of us a unique talent which, when truly lived, changes the physical world into a world of pure light. I'll also be giving mathematical and scientific evidence to show how we got here as spiritual beings into a physical world, in order to convince the left brain analytical part of us that there is only one consciousness and one God, and that we all are part of the oneness. This is important, for it brings both sides of the brain into balance. This balance opens the pineal gland and allows the prana, the life force energy, to enter the innermost part of our physical being. Then, and only then, is the body of light called the Mer-Ka-Ba possible. However, please understand that the evidence I originally learned this information from, in and of itself, is not important. The information could, in most cases, be completely changed to different information without affecting the outcome. In addition, I made many mistakes because I am now human. What is most interesting to me is that every time I made a mistake, it led to a deeper understanding of the reality and of a higher truth. So I say to you, if you find an error, look deeper. If you get hung up on the information by overestimating its value, you will totally miss the point of the work. What I have just said is paramount to understanding this work. I'll also be giving my personal experiences, many of which I admit are outrageous by the ordinary world standards. Perhaps they are not so outrageous by the old world standards, but it is you who must decide if they are true or if they're just stories, or if it even matters. Listen deeply with your heart, for your heart always knows the truth. Then I intend to share with you as much as I can in the second volume, a specific breathing technique that will help you return to the vastly higher state of consciousness from which we all came. It is the remembrance of the breath connected to the light body of the Mer-Ka-Ba. This is one of the primary purposes of this work. At this point, a short story of how this book came around is in order. You will read about the angels, so I will not begin there, but rather with the latter events. In 1985, the angels asked me to begin teaching the meditation of the Mer-Ka-Ba. I first learned it in 1971 and have been practicing it ever since, but I did not want to become a teacher. My life was easy and fulfilled. Basically, I was comfortable and I didn't want to work so hard. The angels said that when someone is given spiritual knowledge, they must share it. They said it was the law of creation. Knowing they were right, I opened my first class to the public in the spring of 1985. By 1991, my workshops were filled and overflowing with hundreds of people on the waiting list. I didn't know how to reach everyone who wanted this information. In fact, I could not. So in 1992, I made the decision to release a video of one of my workshops and let it go out to the world. Within less than a year, it was exploding in sales, but there was one big problem. Most of the people who were watching the videos could not really understand what was presented because it was outside the context and the content of their spiritual understanding. I gave a lecture to 90 people in Washington State, all of whom had seen the tapes but had never been to one of my live workshops. It was there that I realized that only about 15% of the people actually knew how to live the meditation by using the instructions on the videotapes. It wasn't working. 85% were confused and unclear about the instructions. Immediately, I took the videotapes off the market. This, however, did not stop the video from continuing to be sold. People wanted the information, so they began to copy the existing tapes to give, sell, or lease. Ever since the angels first appeared in 1971, I've been following their guidance. This is still true today. It was the angels who gave me the meditation of the Mer-Ka-Ba, and it is the meditation that is important here, not the information that is presented. The information is used just to bring us to a point of clarity so we can enter into a particular state of consciousness. Understand that as I received the scientific information in the early years from about 1971 to about 1985, I thought it was for my own personal growth. When I would read a scientific paper or magazine, I would discard it, not realizing that in the future I would have to prove all that I'm saying. Most of the articles have been located, but not all, yet this information needs to go out. You, the reader, have strongly requested it. Therefore, wherever I can, I will document my statements, but some proofs are lost, at least for the moment. Also, part of the information is from non-scientific sources such as angels or interdimensional communications. We understand that straight science needs to be separated from a source who is considered psychic. Scientists are concerned with their credibility. As a side note, I would like to comment that this is similar to a male saying to a female that her feelings are not valid and that only logic is true or valid and that logic must be followed. Naturally, she knows another way. It is the way of life itself. It flows. It has no male logic, but it is equally true. I believe in both, in balance. If you can conceive of a person using both science and psychic abilities together to explore reality, you have come to the right place. Whenever possible, I will differentiate between the two types of sources so that you are clear. This means that you must go within yourself to see if this information is true within your world. If something does not feel right, then discard it and go on. If it feels right, then live it and see if it's really true. But it is my understanding that the mind will never really know the reality until it has joined with the heart. Male and female complete each other. When you read this book, you have two choices. You can come from your left brain, your male side, and take notes and carefully see the logic in each step. Or you can come from your right brain, your female side. Just let go and don't think, feel, watch it like a movie, expanded, not contracted. Either way will work. It is your choice. Finally, as I prepared this book, I had to make another decision. Should the final stages of the meditation, the Mer-Ka-Ba itself, be released? I still feel that an oral teacher is best. Would you jump to the final stages of Tibetan Buddhism after reading one book? What has been decided is that everything will be given here up to the time of the 93 video, with the precaution that you carefully enter the Mer-Ka-Ba and still seek out a Flower of Life facilitator. The information will be given at the end of the second volume. Much has been learned after and beyond these writings that can only be given orally and experientially. The reason I am giving full information is that there are now at least 7 other authors who have reprinted this work in one form or another. Some have taken it word for word, some have paraphrased me, and some have used my artwork in sacred geometry drawings. Some have asked, and some have not. But the end result is that the information is out. Much of it has been distorted, and sometimes it's just plain not true. Please know that it is not to protect myself, but to be responsible for the integrity of the work. This information belongs to the universe, not to me. It is only the purity of the information that I... Okay, now that we're done with that, we can get to the fun stuff. Chapter 1. Remembering our ancient past. How the fall of Atlantis changed our reality. A little less than 13,000 years ago, something very dramatic happened in the history of our planet that we're going to explore in great detail, because what happened in the past is now affecting every aspect of our life today. Everything we experience in our daily living, including the particular technologies we use, the wars that erupt, the foods that we eat, and even the way we perceive our lives, is the direct result of a certain sequence of events that happened during the end of the Atlantean times. The consequences of these ancient events have entirely changed the way we live and interpret reality. Everything is connected. There is only one reality and one God, but there are many, many ways that one reality can be interpreted. In fact, the number of ways to interpret the reality are just about infinite. There are certain realities that many people have agreed upon, and these realities are called levels of consciousness. For reasons we'll get into, there are specific realities that extremely large numbers of beings are focused on, which include the one you and I are experiencing right now. At one time, we existed on Earth in a very high level of awareness that was far beyond anything we can imagine now. We hardly have even the capability to imagine where we once were, because who we were then is so out of context with who we are now. Because of the particular events that happened between 16,000 and 13,000 years ago, humanity fell from that very high place through many dimensions and overtones, ever increasing in density, until we reached this particular place, which we call the third dimension on planet Earth, our modern world. When we fell, and it was like a fall, we were in an uncontrolled spiral of consciousness moving down through the dimensions of consciousness. We were out of control, and it was very much like falling through space. When we arrived here in the third dimension, specific changes took place, both physiologically and in the way we functioned in the reality. The most important change was in the way that we breathed prana, a Hindu word for the life force energy of this universe. Prana is more critical to our survival than air, water, food, or any other substance, and the apex of the upward pointing tetrahedron terminates 1 hand's length above the head, and the apex of the downward pointing tetrahedron terminates 1 hand's length below the feet. A connecting tube runs from the upper apex to the lower point through your body's main energy centers, or chakras. This tube for your body has the diameter of the circle you make when you touch your longest finger to your thumb. It looks like a glass fluorescent tube, except it has a crystalline structure at the ends that fit into the 2 apexes of the star tetrahedron. Before the fall of Atlantis, we used to bring prana simultaneously up and down this tube, and the 2 prana flows would meet inside one of our chakras. Specifically, another major point in the human body is the pineal gland, located almost at the center of the head, which is a huge factor in consciousness. This gland has degenerated from its original size, comparable to a ping pong ball, to its present size, that of a dried pea, because we forgot how to use it a long time ago. And if you don't use it, you lose it. Pranic energy used to flow through the center of the pineal gland. This gland, according to Jacob Lieberman, author of Light, the Medicine of the Future, looks like an eye. And in some respects, it literally is an eyeball. It's round and it has an opening on one portion. In that opening is a lens focusing light. It's hollow and it has color receptors inside. Its primary field of view, though it has not been determined scientifically, is upward towards the heavens. Just as our eyes can look up to 90 degrees to the side from the direction that they face, the pineal gland can also look as much as 90 degrees away from its set direction. Just as we cannot look out back behind our heads, the pineal gland cannot look down toward the earth. Held inside the pineal gland, even in its shrunken size, are all the sacred geometries and understandings of exactly how the reality was created. It's all there in every single person. But these understandings are not accessible to us now because we lost our memories during the fall. And without our memories, we started to breathe differently. Instead of taking in prana through the pineal gland and circulating it up and down through the central tube, we started breathing it in through the nose and the mouth. This caused the prana to bypass the pineal gland, which resulted in our seeing things in a totally different way through a different interpretation called good and evil or polarity consciousness of our one reality. The result of this polarity consciousness has us thinking that we're inside a body looking out, somehow separated from what's out there. This is pure illusion. It feels real, but there is no truth at all to this perception. It's merely the view of reality that we have from this fallen state. For example, there is nothing wrong with anything that happens, for God is in control of the creation. But from one point of view, a polarity view, looking at the planet and how it evolves, we should not have fallen down here. In a normal curve of evolution, we should not be here. Something happened to us that was not supposed to happen. We went through a mutation. We had a chromosome breakage, you might say. So the Earth has been on red alert for almost 13,000 years, and many beings and levels of consciousnesses have been working together to figure out how to get us back onto the path where we were before. The effect of this mistaken fallen consciousness and the ensuing efforts to get us back on track is that something really good, something unexpected, something amazing has resulted. Beings from all over the universe who have been trying to help us with our problem have initiated various experiments on us in an effort to assist, some legally and some without license. One particular experiment is resulting in a scenario that no one anywhere had ever dreamed would become a reality, except one person in a single culture from a long distant past. The Mer-Ka-Ba. There's another major factor that we're going to focus on in this story. 13,000 years ago, we were aware of something about ourselves that we've completely forgotten. The geometric energy fields around our bodies can be turned on in a particular way, which is also connected to our breath. These fields used to spin at close to the speed of light around our bodies, but they slowed down and stopped spinning after the fall. When the field is turned back on and spins, it's called the Mer-Ka-Ba, and its usefulness in this reality is unparalleled. It gives us an expanded awareness of who we are and connects us with higher levels of consciousness and restores the memory of the infinite possibilities of our being. A healthy spinning Mer-Ka-Ba is 50 to 60 feet in diameter, proportionate to one's height. The rotation of a spinning Mer-Ka-Ba can be displayed on a computer monitor using the appropriate instruments, and its appearance is identical with the infrared heat envelope of the galaxy, the same basic shape as the traditional flying saucer. And there's a diagram. The word Mer-Ka-Ba is made of three smaller words, Mer, Ka, and Ba, which, as we are using them, came from ancient Egyptian. It is seen in other cultures as Mer-Ka-Ba, Mer-Ka-Ba, Mer-Ka-Va. There are several pronunciations, but generally you pronounce it as if the three syllables are separate, with equal accents on each. Mer refers to a specific kind of light that was understood in Egypt only during the 18th dynasty. It was seen as two counter-rotating fields of light spinning in the same space, which are generated by certain breathing patterns. Ka refers to the individual spirit, and Ba refers to the spirit's interpretation of this particular reality. And Ba refers to the spirit's interpretation of its particular reality. In our particular reality, Ba is usually defined as the physical body or physical reality. In other realities where spirits don't have bodies, it refers to their concepts or interpretations of the reality that they bring with them. So, the Mer-Ka-Ba is a counter-rotating field of light that affects the spirit and the body simultaneously. It is a vehicle that can take spirit and body, for one's interpretation of reality, from one world or dimension into another. In fact, the Mer-Ka-Ba is much more than this, because it can create reality as well as move through realities. For our purposes here, however, we will focus mainly on its aspect as an interdimensional vehicle, Mer-Ka-Va, meaning chariot in Hebrew. That will help us return to our original higher state of consciousness. Returning to our original state. To be clear, returning to our original state is a natural process that can be easy or difficult according to our belief patterns. However, simply becoming involved with the technical relationships of the Mer-Ka-Ba, such as correcting our breathing patterns or mentally realizing the infinite connections to all patterns of life, for example, is not enough. At least one other factor is even more important than the Mer-Ka-Ba itself, and that is the understanding, realization, and living of divine love. For it is divine love, sometimes referred to as unconditional love, that is the primary factor that allows the Mer-Ka-Ba to becoming a living field of light. Without divine love, the Mer-Ka-Ba is just a machine, and this machine will have limitations that will not allow the spirit that will never allow the spirit that created it to return home and reach the highest levels of consciousness, the place where there are no levels. We must be experiencing and expressing unconditional love in order to move beyond a certain dimension, and the world is fast heading toward the higher place. We are heading away from the place of separatism where we see ourselves inside of our body looking out. That view will soon be gone, and it will be replaced with a different view of reality, where we'll have a sense and knowledge of the absolute unity with all life, and that sense will grow more and more as we continue to move upward through each level on our journey home. Later, we will explore special ways of opening the heart, to kindle compassionate, unconditional love so that you can have a direct experience. If you can just let this happen, you may discover things about yourself that you didn't know before. A higher inclusive reality. Another component we're going to focus on has many names, but in present-day terms, it's usually referred to as the higher self. In the higher self reality, we literally exist in other worlds besides this one. There are so many dimensions and worlds that it almost surpasses human capability to conceive it. These levels are very specific and mathematical, and the spacing and the wavelengths in and between these levels are identical to the relationships within musical octaves and other aspects of life. But right now, your third dimensional consciousness has probably been severed from your higher aspect, so you're aware only of what's going on here on Earth. This is not the norm for beings existing in a natural unfalling state. The norm is that first beings become aware of several levels at once, like chords in music, until finally, as they grow, they become aware of everything everywhere at once. The following example is unusual, but it demonstrates what is being talked about. I'm in communication with someone now who is aware of many levels at once. The scientists who are studying her are speechless. They cannot understand how she's doing what she's doing. She might be sitting in a room, yet she claims to be watching from outer space. NASA checked her out by asking her to see a specific satellite and give specific information that could only be known if someone were actually there. She gave them readings of their instruments, which I'm sure seemed impossible to the scientists. She said she was flying alongside the satellite and simply read them. Her name is Marianne Skinfield. She is legally blind, yet she can walk around a room and no one would know that she cannot see. How does she do it? Recently she called me, and while we were talking she asked if I would like to see through her eyes. Of course I did, so I said yes. Within a few breaths my field of vision opened up, and I was looking through what looked like a huge television screen that filled my field of vision. What I saw was astounding. It seemed that I was moving very fast through space without a body. I could see the stars, and at that moment Marianne and I, seeing through her eyes, were moving alongside a string of comets. She was very close to one of them. It was one of the most real out-of-body experiences I've ever had. Around the perimeter of this TV screen, there were about 12 or 14 smaller TV screens, each one giving extremely fast images. One of them up in the upper right corner was flashing rapidly moving images such as triangles, light bulbs, circles, wavy lines, trees, squares, etc. It was on this screen that she told me what was in the immediate space where her body was located. She could see through these seemingly unrelated images. There was another screen at the bottom left-hand corner where she communicated with other extraterrestrial life that was within the solar system. Here is a person who is in a three-dimensional body on Earth but has full memory and experience of living in other dimensions. The manner of interpreting the reality is unusual. People do not normally see inner TV screens, but we do exist in many other worlds, even though most of us are not aware of it. You presently exist on probably 5 or more levels. Though there is a break between this dimension and others, when you connect with your higher self, you mend that break, after which you'll start becoming aware of the higher levels, and the higher levels start paying more attention to you. Communication begins. This connection to the higher self is probably the most important thing that could happen in your life, more important than the understanding of any of the information I'll be giving. Connecting with the higher self is more important than learning to activate the Mer-Ka-Ba, because if you connect yourself to yourself, you will get absolutely clear information on how to proceed step by step through any reality, and how to lead yourself back home into the full consciousness of God. When you connect with your higher self, the rest will happen automatically. You will still have to live your life, but everything you do will have great power and wisdom within your actions, thoughts, and emotions. Exactly how to connect with one's higher self is what many people, including myself, have been trying to understand. Many people who have somehow made this connection often don't know how it happened. In this course, I'll attempt to explain exactly how to connect with your higher self. I'll do my best. Left and right brain realities. There's one more component to this picture. I'll be spending perhaps half of our time on left brain information, like geometries and facts and all kinds of information that to many spiritual people would seem totally unimportant. I'm doing this because when we fell, we divided ourselves into two, really three, but primarily two main components, which we call male and female. The right brain, which controls the left side of our body, is our feminine component, though it's truly neither male nor female. This is where our psychic and emotional aspect lives. This component knows that there is only one God, and that oneness is all there is. And that oneness is all there is. Though it can't really explain it, it just knows the truth. So there are not a lot of problems with the female component. The problem is on the left side of the brain, the male component. Because of the nature of how the male brain is oriented, a mirror image of the female, it has its logical component forward, more dominant, while the female has its logical component towards the back, less dominant. The left brain does not experience oneness when it looks out into the reality. All it sees is division and separation. For that reason, the male aspect of us is having a difficult time here on earth. Even our major sacred books, such as the Quran, the Hebrew Bible, and the Christian Bible, have divided everything into opposites. The left brain experiences that there is God, but then there's also the devil, perhaps not quite as strong as God, but a huge influence. So even God is seen in terms of duality, as one pole of the opposing forces of dark and light. This isn't true in all sects of religions. There is a few of them that still just see one God. Until the left brain is able to see the unity running through everything, to know that there is truly one spirit, one force, one consciousness moving through absolutely everything in existence, until it knows that unity beyond any doubt, then the mind is going to stay separated from itself, from its wholeness, and from the fullness of its potential. Even if there's the slightest doubt at all about unity, the left brain aspect will hold us back, and we can no longer walk on water. Remember, even Thomas walked on water for a short moment when Jesus asked him to, but one little cell in his big toe said, "Wait a minute, I can't do this," and Thomas sank into the cold water of polarity reality. Where we're going with this information. I'm dedicating a lot of time to showing you beyond any shadow of a doubt that there is only one image in everything. There is one and only one image that created all that exists, and that image is the same image that has formed the electromagnetic field around your body. The same geometries that are in your field can be found around in everything. Planets, and galaxies, and atoms, everything else. We will examine this image in great detail. We're also going to go into the history of the Earth, because it is very important to our present situation. We cannot really understand how we got here if we don't know the process that led us to this point. So we'll spend a considerable length of time talking about what happened a long time ago. Then we'll slowly come forward until we get to see what's going on today. It's all tied together. The same old thing has been going on all along, and it's still going on. In fact, it never stopped. Those of you who are predominantly right-brained may feel inclined to skip this left brain material, yet it is most important for you to hang on in there. It is through balance that spiritual health returns. When the left brain sees absolute unity, it begins to relax, and the corpus callosum, the band of fibers joining the two hemispheres, opens in a new way, allowing an integration between the two sides. The link between the left and the right brain widens, a flow starts, information is passed back and forth, and the opposing sides of the brain begin to integrate and synchronize with each other. If you're hooked up for biofeedback, you can actually see this happening. This action turns on the pineal gland in a different manner and makes it possible for your meditation to activate the light body of the Mer-Ka-Ba. Then the whole process of regeneration and recovery of our previous light levels of consciousness can proceed. It is a growth process. If you are studying any other spiritual practice, you do not need to stop in order to begin working on the Mer-Ka-Ba, unless, of course, your teacher does not want to mix traditions. Other meditations that are based on truth can be extremely useful once the Mer-Ka-Ba is spinning, because then noticeable results can evolve very, very quickly. I will repeat myself, just so you're sure. The light body of the Mer-Ka-Ba does not contradict or inhibit any other meditation or religion that upholds the belief that there is only one God. So far, we've talked about the ABCs of spirituality. These are just the beginning steps, but these first steps are the most important ones, I know. Your left brain may love all of this information and file it away in neatly labeled pigeonholes. This is fine. Or you can just relax and read this like an adventure story, a mind stretcher, a fantasy. However you read it, the fact that you are reading this book is what matters, and you will receive whatever you're meant to receive. In the spirit of oneness, then, let us embark upon this journey of exploration together. Challenging the belief patterns of our parents. Many ideas we believe today and facts we've been taught in school are just not true, and people are now beginning to realize this worldwide. Of course, usually these patterns were believed to be true at the time they were taught, but these concepts and ideas changed, and the next generation was taught different truths. For example, the concept of the atom has changed dramatically so many times over the last 90 years, at this point, they don't really adhere to... For example, the concept of the atom has changed dramatically so many times over the last 90 years that at this point they don't really adhere to a concept. They use one, but with the understanding that it might be wrong. At one time, an atom was thought to be like a watermelon, and the electrons were like seeds within the watermelon. We really know very little about the reality that exists around us. Quantum physics has now shown us that the person performing the experiment influences the outcome. In other words, consciousness can change the outcome of an experiment depending on belief patterns. There are other aspects of ourselves we hold true that may not be true at all. One idea that has been held for a long time is that we're the only planet in existence with life on it. In our heart of hearts, we know this isn't true, but this planet will not admit this truth in modern times, even though there is powerful evidence of UFO sightings that have been coming from all over the world nonstop for 50 years. Any subject other than UFOs would have been believed and accepted by the world had the subject not been so threatening. Therefore, we're going to look at evidence that suggests there is a higher consciousness in this universe, not only in the stars, but perhaps right here on Earth. Gathering the anomalies, the Dogon tribe, Sirius B, and dolphin beings. This drawing is truly remarkable. The information in it came from a book about Sirius, The Sirius Mystery by Robert Temple. He had, I was told, between 10 and 12 different subjects to choose from, each one of which would lead to the same conclusion, but from a totally different point of view. I'm glad he chose the one he did, because it happens to relate to another aspect that we will be talking about. Robert Temple was one of the first people to reveal certain facts, though scientists have known for a long time, about an African tribe near Timbuktu called the Dogon. In addition, when they checked the rotational pattern of Sirius B around the larger Sirius A, they found it to be 50.1 years. Now that's absolutely could not be a coincidence. It's just too close and too factual. Yet how did an ancient primitive tribe know such detailed information about a star that could be measured only in the century? But this is only part of their information. They also knew about all the other planets in our solar system, including Neptune, Pluto, and Uranus, which we have discovered more recently. They knew exactly what these planets look like when you approach them from space, which we have also only learned recently. They also knew about red and white blood cells and had all kinds of physiological information about the human body that we've recently learned. All this from a primitive tribe? Naturally, a scientific team was sent over to ask the Dogons how they knew all of this. Well, that was probably a big mistake for these researchers, because if they accepted that the Dogons really had this information, then by default, they must accept how they got it. When they asked, "How did you learn this?" the Dogons replied that the drawings on the walls of their cave showed them. These drawings show a flying saucer, and it looks like that very familiar shape coming out of the sky and landing only on 3 legs. And then it shows the beings in the ship making a big hole in the ground, filling it with water, jumping out of the ship into the water, and coming up to the edge of the water. These beings look very much like dolphins. In fact, maybe they were dolphins, but we don't know this for certain. Then they started to communicating with the Dogons. They described where they came from and gave the Dogon tribe all of this information. That's what the Dogons said. The scientists just sat there. Eventually, they said, "No, we didn't hear that," because it didn't fit into anything they thought they knew. They just kind of hid the information somewhere under a carpet in their minds. Most people, scientists included, just do not know what to do with these kinds of facts. There has been a lot of information like this we just don't know what to do with. Since we can't find a way to integrate this unusual information with what we already think we know, we just stick it away somewhere. Because the theories don't work, if we keep it. Here's another thing the Dogons knew. This little drawing was on their walls. But the scientists didn't know what the heck it was, until computers calculated the orbits of Sirius A and Sirius B. As seen from Earth, this pattern shown in the Dogon cave is identical to the pattern made by Sirius B moving around Sirius A in a specific time frame, which happens to be from the year 1912 to the year 1990. The dolphins, or whoever those beings were, gave this present-day diagram time pattern to the Dogons at least 700 years ago. Now, a trip to Peru and more Dogon evidence. I first came upon this Dogon information in 1982 or 83. I found myself around a group of people who were working with the Dogon tribe, who were actually going there and communicating with them. Then, in 1985, I took a group of people to Peru, including one of those Dogon researchers. We checked into a plush hotel in Cusco called the Hotel San Agustin, intending to go walking the following day on the Inca Trail, about 40 miles over the mountaintops. You can walk up to about 14,000 feet and then drop down to Machu Picchu, which is about 5,000 feet below. It's beautiful. Our hotel was a Spanish adobe palace hidden behind great walls in the center of town. We were paired off so that we could get cheaper rates. I was with the Dogon researcher, and he was constantly telling me what they were learning, including a lot more than what we're discussing here. We got a room, and the room number was 23. He got all excited and exclaimed, "Room 23, a very auspicious number." From Africa, where the Dogons live, the star Sirius disappears below the horizon and is out of sight for a couple of months. Then it appears again on the morning of July 23rd, when it rises about 1 minute before the sun. It appears bright ruby red just above the horizon, almost exactly due east. 60 seconds later, the sun emerges. So you can see Sirius for just a moment, then it's gone. This is called the heliacal rise of Sirius, which is a very important moment for most of the ancient world, not just for the Dogons and Egypt. This is the moment when Sirius and the sun and the earth are in a straight line across space. In Egypt, almost all the temples were aligned with this line, including the gaze of the Sphinx. Many of the temples had a tiny hole in the wall somewhere. Then there would be another tiny hole through another wall, then another through another wall, and another through another, going into some dim inner chamber. In that chamber, there would be something like a cube or golden mean rectangle of granite sitting in the middle of a room with a little mark on it. And the moment of the heliacal rising of Sirius, the ruby-red light would strike the altar for a few seconds, which would begin their new year and the first day of the ancient Sothic calendar of Egypt. Anyway, here we are in Peru, getting the room and remarking about the number 23. We walked into the room and set our things down. Then we both looked at the bed, and on the bedspread we saw this image. We just stood there in amazement, looking at it for about 5 minutes before we could even speak, because the wheels in our head were going around so fast, trying to figure out how this could be. If you look again at the image of the beings who got out of the flying saucer, they looked very similar. They were half in and half out the water, air-breathing mammals, and their tail fins were horizontal, not vertical, like fish. The only sea creatures with fins are cetaceans, such as dolphins and whales. But the Dogon image is from Africa, and here we are in Peru, staring at a very similar looking mammal. This just didn't compute. So we asked the hotel personnel, "What do you know about this emblem?" They didn't know much. They were mostly of Spanish descent and weren't tied much into the Indian legends. They didn't know the old stories of creation, so they had no idea what it meant. Here is a picture of the whole insignia. In order to find out more, we rented a little car and drove around the area asking other people. We finally ended up at Lake Titicaca talking to some Uros Indians. At one point I asked, "What do you know about this?" They said, "Oh yeah," and proceeded to tell me a story that sounded very much like what the Dogons had told. This is their creation. A Sanskrit poem and pie. Let's look at something totally different now to suggest that the ancient beings from this world were perhaps more evolved than we give them credit for. Figure 1-7 is a phonetic translation of a Sanskrit poem. It was shown in an article published in Clarion Call magazine in the early 80s, I believe. The English translation is shown below the Sanskrit. O Lord Krishna, anointed with the yogurt of milkmaid's worship, O Savior of the fallen, O Master of Shiva, please protect me. Over the years, researchers have discovered that each one of these Sanskrit sounds corresponds to a numerical value. It took them a long time to figure this out. Figure 1-8 shows that all the various sounds that are possible to make in Sanskrit. Each sound has a numerical value from 0 to 9, and some syllables have 2 number values. For instance, ka, a primary sound, translates as spirit and corresponds to either 0 or 1, depending on its usage, I assume. When researchers took these different sound values and applied them to this particular poem, a mathematical figure came up that is extremely significant. 0.3141592653589, continuing out to 31 digits. This is the exact number of pi divided by 10 carried out to 32 digits. No one has ever figured out how to calculate for the decimal point, which is why this is pi over 10. If you move the decimal point 1 digit to the right, then it would be 3.14, etc., the diameter of a circle divided into its circumference. Well, they might have known about the diameter of a circle divided into its circumference, but in our culture's understanding of who these ancients were, there is no possibility that they could have calculated it with that kind of accuracy. Yet here is undeniable evidence. There are many, many poems of these and many, many other writings in Sanskrit. I don't know how far they've come in deciphering all of it, but I think that when all is said and done, it's going to be pretty remarkable. How do they do that? Who were these people, really? Is it possible that our understanding of them is not exactly correct? Were they maybe a little more advanced than we thought? This poem definitely suggests it. How old is the Sphinx? The following is also probably one of the most important discoveries on the planet ever. It's happening right now in this moment. However, it began about 40 years ago when R.A. Schwaller de Lubitz, He's a famous, self-educated Egyptian archaeologist who has written many books. He and his stepdaughter, Lucy Lamy, have demonstrated a profound understanding of sacred geometry in the Egyptian culture. While observing the Sphinx, Schwaller de Lubitz became especially interested in the tremendous wear on its surface. Toward the back of the Sphinx, there are wear patterns that cut 12 feet deep into the surface, and this type of wear pattern is totally different from the patterns on other buildings in Egypt. The wear patterns on the other buildings, supposedly built at the same time, are textured by sand and wind, which is consistent if the buildings are, as believed, around 4,000 years old. But the wear patterns on the Sphinx look like they've been smoothed with water. According to mainstream thought, the Sphinx, the Great Pyramid, and other associated buildings were built around 4,500 years ago in the 4th dynasty under the Cheops. When this discrepancy was brought up to Egyptian archaeologists, they refused to listen. This went on for about 40 years. Other people noticed it, but the Egyptians simply would not admit the obvious. Then a man named John Anthony West became interested. He's written many, many books on Egypt, including Serpent in the Sky and a fine Egyptian guidebook. When he heard about the Sphinx dispute, he went on to look for himself. He could see that the wear was incredibly excessive and that it did look like water had caused the wear. He also found, like Schwaller de Lubitz, that he could not get the accredited archaeologists to listen to his beliefs about the Sphinx. There is a reason for this denial, I believe. Please understand, I'm not trying to discredit a major religion. I'm merely reporting. You see, there are around 5,000 Egyptian archaeologists in the world, and they all pretty much agree with each other in most ways. This agreement has become a tradition. They make little changes, but not too many, and not too fast either, and most agree on the age of the pyramids. All of these archaeologists are Muslim, and with a few exceptions, and with their holy book is the Quran. The Quran, in its traditional interpretation, says that creation began about 6,000 years ago. So, if a Muslim were to say that a building is 8,000 years old, he would be disputing their Bible. They cannot do that. They simply cannot. So they wouldn't even talk about it. They won't discuss it. If you say that anything is more than 6,000 years old, they will not agree. They will do anything to protect their belief, making sure that no one knows about any man-made objects that might have been more than 6,000 years old. For instance, they've enclosed the pyramids of the First Dynasty, which are older than Saqqara, and built military fortifications around it within the walls so that nobody can get in. Why? Because they are older than or close to 6,000 years. So John Anthony West stepped outside the Egyptian archaeology world and brought in an American geologist named Robert Schoch, who did a computer analysis that gave a totally different scientific point of view. Lo and behold, and beyond with any doubt at all, the Sphinx does have water wear patterns, and in a desert that's at least 7,000 years old, it puts its age well over 6,000 years. On top of that, computers have calculated that it would take a minimum of 1,000 years of continuous torrential rain dumps on the Sphinx, non-stop, for 24 hours a day, to cause that kind of wear. This means that the Sphinx has to be at least 8,000 years old minimum, because it's not likely that it bucketed rain non-stop for 1,000 years. They figured that it's got to be at least 10 to 15,000 years older, maybe a lot older. When this evidence gets out to the world, it will be one of the most powerful revelations on this planet in a very, very long time. It's going to have a bigger effect on the world's view of itself than probably any other discovery. This evidence has not entered the schools or general knowledge yet, though it has gone all around the planet. It has been looked at and checked out and thought about and argued over, and in the end, most scientists have agreed that it cannot be doubted. So, the age of the Sphinx has now been put back to at least 10,000 years, maybe 15,000 or a lot more, and it's already changing the entire worldview of the people on the cutting edge of archaeology. You see, judging by everything we presently think we know, the oldest civilized people in the world were the Sumerians, and they go back approximately 3,800 years BC.